Before we begin, we are required by law to remind you of the location of exit doors around the perimeter of the hall. As you face the stage, you will find an exit on the left and on the right. To the rear of the hall, there are two exits, one at the top of each aisle. Please be aware that your closest exit may be behind you. Thank you.
Welcome everyone. How many in the room have been to a public occurrences forum here before with us? Welcome back. For those of you who are new, welcome for the first time. I'm Mike Ritz. I'm the Executive Director of Leadership Rhode Island. Together for the past 6 years, the Providence Journal, Rhode Island College, and Leadership Rhode Island has presented 14 free public forums that are critical topics within our state. Tonight is year 7. Over 5,000 people have attended our public occurrences series to date, and the Rhode Island Press Association has awarded us with the Esteemed Community Outreach Award twice. For those wondering about the name of the series, you're looking at this thing, you're like, what's with the K? Public Occurrences was the name of the first multi-page newspaper in the Americas, published in Boston in 1690. After review of the first edition, the governor and council said the paper contained reflections of a very high nature and noted it as also sundry, doubtful, and uncertain. They declared their high resentment and disallowance of said pamphlet and strictly forbid any person or persons in the future to set forth anything in print without license first obtained from those that are or shall be appointed by the government to grant the same. We've come a long way, folks. So it's our intention in these public forums to extend Rhode Island's lively experiment through educating and engaging our citizenry around current issues our state faces, issues which are controversial, complex, and significant to Rhode Island's future, and to do so civilly. Proof that we as a Rhode Island community can come together, have tough conversations, because we need to in order to move forward. But we have to do so civilly. Past topics have included, check out the variety of these things, marijuana legalization, commercial fishing sustainability, pension reform, gun violence, teacher evaluations, Obamacare, cybersecurity, 4 forums on the economy, mental health, our returning veterans from the war on terror, race in Rhode Island, and tonight what you all have come for, DCYF, Children in Crisis. All of these forums were public engagement manifestations resulting from the Providence Journal's award-winning investigative articles. Tonight's forum was the fastest-selling forum we've had to date in 7 years. You'll see a lot of empty seats in here, and I think we've all got to question that, because there were also a 100-person wait list. So if you're one of those people that sign up and don't show up, remember these seats, because that's what a lot of people that wanted to be here couldn't be here, because we were totally maxed out to maximum capacity. But you'll see tonight, hopefully people will still arrive, we have room. So consider that next time. If you sign up, show up, and if you don't, let us know so that we can give that seat to someone else who wants to be here. We have structured our guest experts into 3 panels this evening in order to answer the following 3 questions formed by Providence Journal journalists as a starting point for tonight's discussion. Panel 1 will begin with, why does DCYF seem to cycle from tragedy to tragedy? Panel 2, what do insiders say could be changed? And panel 3, what are the policymakers doing to address the issues? And this forum, like all the other ones we've had before it, are intended to present you with multiple views of the topic at hand. It's impossible to include all of the viewpoints on the 8 panelists on the stage, but when the time is right, and I'll let you know when, we're going to encourage you to expand our perspectives through your own questions, while remaining civilized and respectful for one another and our esteemed panel. For reasons of confidentiality and legality, we will not entertain questions tonight of a personal nature, meaning this is not the place to bring up specifics around a specific case. So hopefully tonight, all of us will walk away with a better understanding of the current conditions of DCYF and the children, youth, and families for whom it serves. In the spirit of Margaret Mead's quote that Leadership Rhode Island has attempted to embody for decades, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. I hope that many of you will hear something tonight that will motivate you to take action, to ensure the future of Rhode Island for which you seek. As we've witnessed throughout U.S. history, change is made by we the people. So it's my pleasure now to introduce you to our other sponsors, our forum sponsors and partners. First off is Providence Journal publisher Janet Hassan.
Good evening. It's great to see so many people here to join with us and build on the series that's been published in the Providence Journal that's seeking solutions to the problems that impact our most vulnerable Rhode Island children. I want to recognize the Journal reporters whose work has brought us here tonight. Sitting in front, Tom Mooney, Jennifer Bogdan, and our retired editor, Peter Phipps, who helped launch the series together with the reporters. Additionally, we have additional Journal staff here, our executive editor, Alan Rosenberg, Paul Edward Parker, who will be crunching the numbers that emerge from your clickers, Maria Caprizio, and Whitman Littlefield from our web team, who are going to be capturing the questions from Twitter and ProvidenceJournal.com. And yes, we are live streaming the program for the first time tonight. I want to thank our partners in this series, Leadership Rhode Island, obviously Mike Ritz, you just heard from, Rhode Island College, the president, Frank Sanchez, has been all very great partners in this series. How we treat the most vulnerable among us really tells us so much about ourselves. Tonight, we embark on the search for answers on how we can better serve Rhode Island children. Let's begin now. Thank you for joining in on this conversation.
Thank you, Janet. And on behalf of Rhode Island College's President Frank Sanchez, Anna Canna-Morales, who is the Associate Vice President of Community Equity and Diversity, is going to welcome us to the school.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anna Canna-Morales, and I'm here to give greetings on behalf of Dr. Frank Sanchez, who is traveling, but is a very big supporter of public occurrences, and is thrilled that Public Occurrences is yet again here on campus. On behalf of Rhode Island College, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to campus, and specifically to Sappensley Hall. I see many familiar faces in the audience. I'm glad you all are here, that you took the time, and I'm very excited that this is being live streamed. I'm sure that President Sanchez will see it once it's podcasted, and we're able to see it, he's able to see it at another time. In a time where we face debates about issues, I would say almost on a daily basis and mostly via Twitter, the need for open civil discourse has never been greater. Rick is pleased to once again host a Public Occurrences on our campus. We're also very pleased to be a partner, and we will continue to be a partner as long as important issues facing Rhode Islanders are in the forefront. Thank you to the Providence Journal, to Leadership Rhode Island for making this night possible. A special recognition to the Providence Journal for its coverage of the issues. The DCYF system certainly is not an easy system to cover. Over the past few weeks, the stories have been thought-provoking, powerful, human, and difficult at times to get through. At Rhode Island College, we understand the importance of engaging in conversations like these and getting diverse perspectives on the issues affecting our world. As a matter of fact, it is one of the best tools that we can use to inspire and to expand diversity in thought and in expression. In a moment, you will hear directly from expert panelists. The college is proud that the panel includes one of our very own, the Dean of the School of Social Work, Dr. Sue Perlmutter. On a personal note, as a graduate of the Rhode Island College School of Social Work, I spent many years in the field, specifically working with women who are addicted to substances and who are either pregnant or parenting very young children. And I saw firsthand Rhode Island's child protective system interplay with treatment. Sometimes miracles happened, and other times our hearts were broken. They were broken for the children who were caught in the middle of adult issues, policies, through no fault of their own. In the end, I stand by my chosen profession. Social work is an extremely rewarding and important profession, and today can make the difference between life and death for our most vulnerable citizens. Again, thank you all for coming out this evening and for your interest in this topic.
Thank you, Anna. So you heard it. For the first time ever at Public Occurrences, we are live streaming this event on ProvidenceJournal.com. And that's largely thanks to students at Rhode Island College, Michael Kane and Tom Lemus. So thank you very much for hooking it up. We are also live tweeting tonight, so feel free to tweet. The hashtag is up on the screen already, ProJoDCYF. And a Providence Journal reporter may select a question or so from readers on the feed to ask tonight as well. So if you've got a question or you want to contribute to Twitter, go for it. Lastly, we'll be asking you, those with iClickers, questions before and after each panel this evening. So here is the first iClicker question for those of you who have iClickers. What's the biggest problem facing DCYF? You will choose the best answer out of the following. A, not enough money. B, inadequate staff and training. C, incompetent leadership. D, too many children needing services. Or E, it's not a priority for the public or lawmakers. Everyone have a chance? And there are results. Largely E, 41%. It's not a priority for the public or lawmakers. So in the essence of time tonight, you have been given a program with each of the panelists' bio, title, bio, and so forth. So I'm not going to go through all of that so that we can keep this thing tightly run. But just so you know, each of the panelists has been asked to give an up to maximum 3-minute introduction, their opening answer, if you will, to the question facing the panel. Introducing our first panel here, we have Sue Perlmutter, Dean of Rhode Island College School of Social Work, and Susan Morris, retired DCYF social worker. And we're going to begin with Ms. Morris. The question is, why does DCYF seem to cycle from tragedy to tragedy?
Thank you. So, there are 3 things that you should know and understand as we begin this process about the Department for Children, Youth, and Families. First, there is no one magic solution to fixing DCYF. Multiple solutions must be applied to multiple areas at the same time. The solution will require new staff, new policies and practices, and new resources. We cannot just throw money at the issues. We must come up with a plan that impacts all areas of the department, not just one. Second, this system is extremely complex, and the day-to-day decisions being made are life-changing for the families served. Every day across the department, DCYF staff are beginning each day knowing that they will not get everything done that needs to be done. They are juggling so many balls in the air at once. Face-to-face visits with children and families, family visits, court, case plans to be developed and reviewed, referrals to be made. It's impossible to get it all done. In the midst of this, there are decisions to be made. Do we remove? Do we reunify? Do we file to terminate? Is this the right adoptive family? These are life-changing decisions. This should not be made in the heat of a moment, nor in a rush, nor should one person be making these decisions alone. All of this happens within the most complex state agency. I challenge you to find a single state agency with a broader mission and mandate than the Department for Children, Youth, and Families. Children's behavioral health, children's developmental disabilities, child protection, child welfare, daycare licensing, juvenile probation, and juvenile corrections. The mission is vast. In order to serve its function, the department must have adequate line staff across all divisions. It must have policy and practice that supports collaborative decision-making across all divisions. There can be no silo mentality within DCYF. Every division is working with the same families and need the information, knowledge, and skills from the other divisions to make informed decisions. DCYF must have community resources available in sufficient quantity and quality to be used by families to make positive change. This needs to happen at the same time. You cannot take positions from family service units, apply them to child protection, or vice versa, and expect the system to improve. This does not work. That method has been tried over and over and has never worked. If the new positions for child protection took staff away from other divisions, you haven't solved anything, you have just moved the fire. We must stop playing that number game. The real solutions lie within the staff at DCYF. They know what they need. Listen to them. The solutions lie within the community partners. They want to provide services to families that support them and help make meaningful, positive change for them. Bring them into the problem-solving process. The solutions lie within the families. They know who their supports are. Use them. Put them all together, and they will come up with a meaningful, workable solution that will make DCYF whole. Then make a plan, fund the plan, and wholly implement the plan.
Thank you very much. So that little buzzer is our 3 minutes, keeping everybody on track. Nicely done. Now we'll hear from Dr. Perlmutter.
The question of why DCYF moves from tragedy to tragedy, I think what Susan tried to talk about is all the ways we could prevent that from happening. I'm going to back up a little and talk about some of the reasons that tragedy seems to follow this agency. There is an issue of leadership, like who is in the leadership? What capacity does the leader have to bring to the organization? How is that leader able to see the services and the complexity that Susan talked about and work within that complexity? Over the life of DCYF, it has not been possible for a leader to emerge who was able to manage all of that complexity. And that's very important for the organization. Staffing matters too, and I'm just going to talk for a second about workforce development. DCYF has to have staff who are well-trained and prepared for their positions. And we know that the kind of training that we have had in the past is no longer working because the family situations are very different and much more complex. So the lack of training, the leadership vacuum sometimes has really caused us to face these kinds of tragedies. I think there is this last piece that the job of DCYF is to assure that the children who are in its care and in the care of its community partners are safe, and that they have a sense of well-being, and that they can achieve some permanency in their lives. Those are the outcomes that the federal government really pushes us to have. It is very difficult for an agency like DCYF to follow all of those requirements. The most basic one is to keep children safe, and that's where we have to keep our attention over the coming years.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our first panelist. So we have an iClicker question before we get to the second panel. And it's right up on the board. In general, which is better for children in Rhode Island now? A, staying in a family that has been referred to DCYF, or B, entering state care? You get two choices. That's all you get. You pick the best. I see you. A lot of abstaining from this one. You don't like any of them. You all set? Ready to close it? Any final thoughts? Nope? All right, let's close her up. A, by a large margin. Staying in a family has been referred to DCYF. Let me introduce you to our second panel. Michelle Saunders is a Rhode Island business executive who grew up in state care. She also happens to be a graduate of Leadership Rhode Island's 2009 class. You wouldn't expect me not to say that. And Bruce Peralt is Rhode Island banker who grew up in state care. Jennifer Griffith is the child advocate for the state of Rhode Island. So that's our second panel, and we're going to begin with Ms. Sanders with the question of what do insiders say could be changed? Michelle?
So as I thought and I prepared to come here today, I tried to think about what relevance I might bring, because I've aged out of care a long time ago, right? So, but I did have an opportunity to be connected with two different groups, one of foster parents and one of youth who have recently aged out of care. So thank you to Lisa Gillette for connecting me with these two groups. I also have been a kinship foster parent, and what I found in my conversations, what came to light for me was that not a lot has changed since the 1970s and 1980s from when I was in care. Not a lot has changed from the mid-2000s to when I was a kinship foster parent. And I'm going to second what Dr. Perlmutter has said in that training needs to happen not just for the folks that work in DCYF or for the agencies, but what I heard from the youth and the parents is that there's just not enough information. There's not enough information about the programming that's happening out there and the things that youth can take advantage of, especially for their age group. I was able to hear from a young woman who's in the audience today who said she heard of programs after she was already too old to participate in them. I talked to parents who said that they had to find resources on the internet of things that happen within this state. They got a few hours of training, but they had no idea what was available to them, and they found it on their own, and then they had to seek out someone to connect them with different services and resources, and that could be from a mental health perspective, to different programming, to support groups, and so I would say that there's a lot of information that's given to foster parents when they first begin, but there's not enough connections to continue to seek out that information. I'm an adult educator by trade, so we know that people learn in different ways, which is they learn by doing, they learn by seeing, they learn by reading, and so we need to not only think of this from what is the social work perspective and how do we help people through social work, but also how do people continue to thrive and learn. So I could talk on and on about some of the things that I was able to hear, but I could also take it from my own perspective. When we talked about, is it the best to enter state care or is it the best to stay unified with the family and connected to the family? I had both experiences. In the years that I was in care, the option that we had was to be reunified with our mother, and we would visit her on the weekends, and those were some of the most terrifying experiences.
Might have a loose wire here.
Or it could be that no one wants me to tell my story. So those were some of the most terrifying experiences that I had on the weekends of being unified with my mother. So it's not an easy solution. I'm going to say that as someone who represents that. I also, I know Bruce. I've known Bruce for years, and we don't necessarily represent the kids that are adopted. We were both adopted. We don't represent the makeup of kids who get adopted from care, and there is a race disparity of who ends up getting adopted from care. So I'm going to use my 3 minutes to say that as well.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Let's hear from Bruce.
Hello, everyone. If my head is just like blinding you from the lights, I do apologize. Michelle's, you definitely brought it to a head, my situation as well. I was adopted at the age of 7. I was placed in the foster care at the age of 2. During that entire time, I had one visit with a parent who was supposed to be the biological parent, but it was never really known. So what needs to be changed is, I think, a little bit more transparency with the foster parent, with the person that is going to be giving care to the child that is going into state care. They need to know what's going on, because there's going to come a point in time, especially in my situation, my experience, I was adopted by a Portuguese woman and a Frenchman. And there were many times I did not look at them in a way of, your mom and dad, you're the people taking care of me. And they were able to answer just that much. They were able to give me the information that I needed and that I wanted just that much. And it just so happened that by accident, I was able to find who my biological family is. Was able to reunite with them, half of them, my biological mother's side. I think that being able to start that process with the foster parent, giving them as much information as possible. They're there to be able to answer questions. They're there to be able to nurture, take care of. Child comes home from school asking questions. They have to be able to answer those questions, or at least give them a close facsimile of what is going on in their lives or what happened in their lives, because there are going to be questions. Whether it be that they look just like them or they don't look like them. If they have a background where, you know, they've...
Get a hot mic, don't you?
Start talking like this.
You're all right.
And just basically, and not to get off topic, but just basically being able to educate the people that are going to be taking care of the children that are going through state care. There was a question that was asked in regards to the referral. Well, the referral that can be given, from my own experiences, that I've seen that there are parents that are in foster care that are doing it for the money. They have that steady stream of income coming. And yes, they're going to refer to be able to ensure that they have money coming in, as opposed to doing it for the reason that they need to be doing it for, is to take care of a child that is in need. And when that breaks down, and when, you know, the education is not there, continuous education, not just here's your packet of information, this is what you need to do. Oh, by the way, you want to do this for 20 some odd years, and with my experience, 117 children in and out of a home over the course of that period of time, 20 years, that just basically means that it's a mill. The children is going through, and the amount of education that a parent is being given for that child situation is just not adequate.
Thank you, Bruce. I apologize for the technicalities here. We've got a speaker over here if you're in the house and know what to do about that on the fly, but we're getting a lot of static from this particular speaker next to me. Let's continue, if we can, with Jennifer Griffith. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd have to say I'm going to change my comments based upon the iClicker question, which was presented to the audience as to why DCYF is failing. And if I were to say what things need to be changed, if I had been answering that question, I think the first three, A, B, and C, and the answers were ineffective leadership, inadequate staff or training, or a general lack of funding. Until Dr. Picola arrived, I would say all three. Again, I am thankful for the governor finally picking someone who is a social worker, is someone who understands what caseworkers are doing each day. And I think to not acknowledge that the previous chief strategy officer basically decimated that department would be remiss in my part not to say so as the child advocate. I will also like to say that the staff at DCYF is not inadequate. The number of people sitting next to them in their cubicle is inadequate. The number of cases they have is inappropriate, it's offensive, and it's wrong. That's what's wrong with DCYF. They need more funding. And for those who read the article this past weekend in the paper, continued cuts to DCYF is not going to turn that ship around, and I think that's where the greater attention is. And I said, A, B, and C, I would have selected, I'm a lawyer, I don't like to just pick one answer, I'd like to explain all three. I will say until Dr. Picola arrived, there was no leadership, it was a dictatorship. And I think for those who work at DCYF, they are doing their job every day. And this is certainly not about the staff being inadequate or the trainings which weren't presented to them. So I want to make it clear as the child advocate, this is not about bad people who work at 101 Friendship Street. This is about someone who was running 101 Friendship Street. So for me, I think that part of that has been changed. Will it change overnight? No, it will not. But I welcome the opportunity to be here and answer these questions. But I would like to acknowledge that there actually is a leader there now, and she is a social worker, and I think that has meant a lot to those who work at the department. Thank you.
You've won over the crowd, Jennifer. You've won them over. Okay, so we're going to go to the next iClicker question, and it's right up on the board. Who is most to blame for DCYF's problems? A, the governor, B, the General Assembly, C, DCYF, D, the family court, or E, the public? You're confined to those answers. Looks like everybody's voted. Yep, we're getting there. Pretty close between B and A, right? General Assembly is on there, being identified. All right, let's talk about our third and final panel and hear from these folks. We have Michael Forte, the Chief Judge, Rhode Island Family Court, Trista Piccola, DCYF Director, and Elizabeth Burke-Bryant, Executive Director of Rhode Island Kids Count. So we'll begin with Judge Fort. The question is, what are policymakers doing to address the issues?
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I guess this isn't working. A little bit higher up. Here we go. Got it? I got it. I'll just speak up. There you go. The Family Court's statutory mission is to protect children and to heal families whenever possible, and if not, to efficiently provide for new appropriate families for the child. This is my 31st year on the court, and I have been its leader since January of 2016. My vision as Chief Judge has been to transform the family court into a treatment-focused, rehabilitative court aimed at families as a whole. This evening, I would like to fill you in on one of the programs that has made the family court thus far a realization of that goal. One of the ways I hope to advance this goal is by embracing a path of early intervention. For example, this past spring, the family court implemented a new infant protection program, the Safe and Secure Baby Program, meant to identify and closely monitor at-risk babies who come into the care of the court. Regular review and reassessment of the effectiveness of the services provided to these infants will work to assure their safety. I'm sure that we will have an opportunity to discuss other new initiatives during this discussion tonight. My first order of business upon becoming chief was to develop improve relationships between the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, the provider community, and the court. I work closely with Jamie McDonald to reduce out-of-state placements and to support her in her financial restructuring of the department. I know there's been a lot of negative things said about her, but the department financially had its wheels off at the time of her undertaking, and if nothing else, when she left, I think Dr. Piccola was able to inherit a financially secure department that she's been able to build on. My judges met with Ms. McDonald and her team often to have input and keep an open dialogue about the department's goals and procedures. Since Dr. Piccola has been appointed, we have maintained close communication and work collaboratively with her and her new team on the planning and implementation of new initiatives on both sides. We're pleased that the department has been supportive of our new Safe Babies initiative and provided us with the opportunity to access community services funded by DCYF directly through our intake department without the need for formal legal proceedings. These include important mental health programs, family stabilization programs, and disruptive behavior programs. We, in turn, are supportive of the department's work to reshape the foster care system to develop foster homes with a population, the children most in need of those homes, including foster homes that will accept siblings. I also intend to pursue a discussion on the establishment of mentor homes to accommodate, monitor, and coach family units, that is, parents and children together, so as to avoid, when possible, the trauma attendant on removing children from their homes, separating children from their families, and necessitating unnatural visitation environments. While the court's emphasis has been on early intervention, we have also concentrated on the so-called back end, the transitioning of our children out of state care into adulthood. We've developed a specialized calendar to examine the case plans of 16 to 18-year-olds and are working with the department to reclaim our jurisdiction over 18 to 21-year-olds. Want me to stop? I'm not used to being shut off. Just briefly, of utmost importance is the continuation of an active dialogue between the court and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and in this respect, I would like to personally thank and commend Director Piccola for promoting that dialogue. I'd also be remiss if I did not acknowledge the work of my colleague here, Rhode Island Kids Count, in translating the numbers that provide us comprehensive information on Rhode Island's children and assist the court in developing strategies to meet the needs of our children. A sincere thank you to you and your staff, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that was worth the wait. Lots of thank you and gratitude. I like that. Okay, so let's hear from Trista.
Sure.
I wish in some ways I could have gone first because these very thoughtful comments are really difficult to follow. And thank you to everyone who showed up tonight and to everyone who's listening. I'm glad to be here to be part of this very important conversation about Rhode Island's child welfare system. What I'd like to start with on behalf of the department is to say to you that we are committed. And we do have a new sense of urgency around reducing risk and strengthening protections so that we are making a real and lasting difference in children's lives. It is entirely about child safety. In the short time that I've been here, we've taken immediate action on a number of fronts, and I'm sure we may get some additional questions about this evening. But my evaluation is it's going to take more time to get performance where we want it to be, where everyone expects it to be. We have been focused on using proven practices that target early intervention, prevention, and permanency for our kids. It's already been mentioned, we don't do this work alone, we never have. It takes strong, robust community relationships and partnerships. As I look across this room this evening, I see all of you who have been supports to our kids and families. We can't do this work without you, and we know that. We need to be sure that every child in Rhode Island has access to a stable, supportive, loving, and permanent family, and that those families have access to the resources that they need when they need them. I think that recent events cause us to reflect on not just the challenges in the child welfare system, but also the issues that put our kids in harm's way in the first place. Serious mental health issues, addiction issues, economic instability, violence at home and in our communities, inadequate caretaking capacity. So again, I'm glad to be here this evening. You know, it's not often in child welfare that we have an opportunity like this to have this kind of conversation. I'm very interested in talking about the challenges, but I'm even more interested in talking about possible solutions. I'd really like to hear what's on people's minds. And to end, I'm going to make an unshameless pitch for our Be an Anchor campaign. Across this state, we have kids who are waiting for a family, and we need your help. So our Be an Anchor campaign is about our need for foster and adoptive families, again, so that every child can be raised in a supportive and loving family. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next year, we'll hear from Elizabeth Burke-Bryant.
Hi, good evening. It's truly an honor to be on this panel and with the other panelists, and thank you for having us all here for this discussion, and thank you for coming. I think the biggest barometer, a positive one, of what can and will be done to change DCYF to the department that we need it to be in Rhode Island is to take a look at the response to this evening. It's going to take engaged citizens, engaged inside-outside partners, and real leadership that's not a flash in the pan, but sustained over time, and you are all a part of that, making that happen. So in answer to the question, what can policymakers do, or what are they doing? Number one, it's to ensure the best possible leadership for the department and for other key positions that make the system function. I think here, the individuals, three over, starting with Director Trista Piccola, Chief Judge Fort, and Child Advocate Jennifer Griffith, are the people that need to be in place in order to turn the corner and make sure that the most vital part of the function of DCYF is fulfilled, which is to protect the most vulnerable children in our state. So I am hopeful that with this leadership team, which is only part of the picture, I think a lot of times we think it's just a government fix. It is government's responsibility, but it's also the partnerships that absolutely have to be supported with community, providers, foster families, people who care about children in Rhode Island to make this work. Policymakers have to adopt policies to ensure accountability and results. A recent example of that was the change in the reporting law on child deaths and near deaths, near fatalities. That was a really important move by the General Assembly. It was urgently needed because at the time they passed that law, there had been almost a complete breakdown in communication between DCYF and the Office of Child Advocate, which was set up by law to be the watchdog that it needs to be for the department. So the best possible scenario is when you have a communication between the two entities, the Child Advocate's Office and DCYF, that's not just when times are good or when there's two leaders that happen to be able to communicate with one another. It has to be a legal requirement. That has made a difference, and that's why we know so much more now. The reporting that was done through the Child Advocate's reports, the reporting out from DCYF is really unprecedented but much needed. So I think that's an example of a policy that insists upon accountability and results. As has been mentioned, we have to have policymakers put this as the top priority in Rhode Island, which is to keep children that the state is removing from homes safe. And so that requires funding, not just throwing money at a problem, but accountability for using that funding for the absolute best possible purpose. Not just to DCYF and its urgent need for more frontline workers and for systems that work, like data systems that are easy to check on what has happened with the family in prior years, but also to vital community partners. DCYF doesn't do this alone. There are intermediary organizations like Adoption Rhode Island, Foster Forward, so many community providers that are out there working on the front lines day in and day out. I think it can no longer be a case of it's the state and the vendors. We're all in this together.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. So that concludes our opening remarks from the panelists, and now I'm about to change hats and go run out there with you all for this Q&A portion. This is the way it works. We alternate between a Providence Journal journalist and an audience member as we pose questions to the panelists. The Providence Journal journalists posing questions tonight are the most intimately knowledgeable on the topic because they've explored the complexities and problems with DCYF through a series of stories. That's Jennifer Bogdan, staff writer. Raise your hand, Jennifer. Tom Mooney, staff writer. And the third journalist on tonight's question panel is Providence Journal's recently retired deputy managing editor, Peter Phipps, who was the instrumental lead in putting tonight together and those panelists. So before we start, I'm going to introduce some ground rules. If you have a question, raise your hand so that I can see you. I will attempt to get to everyone in the room in the order in which I see your hand. I do bounce around as much as I can. And when I come to you for your question, please state your name before asking the question. And know this, I will not let go of the microphone, not ever, never, 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 never. I will be holding it the entire time while you talk into the microphone, just so you know. I hold, you talk into. Your question should be in the form of a question. So that means there must be a question mark at the end of your question. Please address your question to a particular person on the panel that's helpful, and do not attempt to use this time to air out or get answers to your personal cases. Probably a 400-person open public forum is not really the appropriate place to do that, and we won't be entertaining that this evening. Lastly, these public forums are an exercise in civility. Please be courteous to your neighbors and today's panel by being conscious of time, asking your question concisely and in a respectful manner, and no attacking, please. The last 10 minutes will be reserved for 1-minute closing remarks by each of the panelists. Sound good? All right, let's get started. So our first question will come from one of our reporters.
All right, we're going to start with the first question for Susan Morris. Susan, you review state programs for the Federal Department of Family Services. What can you tell us about what is unique to the way Rhode Island runs things, and what about that might be challenging?
Rhode Island, Other states are run more on a county level, not necessarily. Rhode Island's run on an entire state level. We're regionalized, but it really, everything comes from Providence, where other states are more county focused. There's oftentimes more resources. There's a good partnership between the communities and the agencies themselves. There's a big focus on kinship care and supporting that, which we have done in Rhode Island, successfully in the past anyways, is focusing on kinship. They support their staff pretty well with training, with opportunities for promotions, with child support technicians, you know, those kind of aids in getting the job done. And there's a good support from the leadership down, is what I've seen in other states. Not to say that doesn't happen here, because it has been my experience that it does happen. But that seems to be one of the keys.
Who in the audience has a question? Yes, ma'am. Stand up. I'm going to attempt to come to you. Pardon me. So your name and your question.
Mary Tremonti, and honestly, directing it to a specific person, if I have to, I will, but let me ask the question first. Let's put in as a premise, state employee now for pushing 25 years, first 7 at DCYF. As a premise, our state agencies, not just DCYF, all of them, are reactive, not proactive. Crises happen, and we respond to them. And that is a culture in the state. It's an unfortunate culture in the state. So if I have to choose somebody, I will. But I'd really like to hear from each of the panels. Somebody give me something proactive, not a response to legislation, not a response to a baby death, something proactive you would like to see the department do or the legislature provide, etc., that will change the culture and that will make the department a healthier place for all.
Right out of the gate, we're breaking the rules. All right, who wants to answer? Who would like to answer this question? Proactive. Go ahead. Oh.
Mine will be really quick, and that is, and I don't know if this is something that's already been done because I don't have the inside knowledge of DCYF, but generations of families that are in care that have no connections to each other, and I think there needs to be some sort of, and I know some of the vendor agencies are doing this, but some sort of mapping for families, because I can tell you that I have 3 generations of my father's side of the family that are in care that don't even know where each other are, and this is a very small state. So for me, you know, I think that's my response.
And what Michelle is true, as a child advocate, I have access to the entire DCYF system, and I can't tell you how many times people maybe in the same courtroom not realizing that they're there for the same kind of DCYF case, that their sister, still their sister, they may have been terminated from their parents, but it's a very unfortunate situation, you're correct. I think the most proactive thing that could be done by the General Assembly or the government, the governor's office, would be, respectfully, would be to allocate more funding immediately instead of throwing money at the opiate crisis or mental health, as Trista mentioned, or the lack of subsidized housing in Rhode Island. Accept that there are problems, take the benefit of having such a small state, and use the resources which we have, you know, in different communities. Woonsocket, for example, has a very strong social service base to it. It sees that opportunity and asks those who are there to actually, what do they need, and put money at those agencies. The recent cuts make it worse and make it harder each year to provide services. I think we have to make a planful decision to put more money at the department and hope that less problems come from that. That would be my answer.
I could say probably 25 things related to prevention. By definition, the child welfare system has been a reactive system. We respond when something's already going on with the child. But what I would say to you is a couple strategies. One has to do around the prevention of unsafe sleep fatalities, deaths that are entirely preventable. And so when the child advocate came out with her report of 4 infant deaths in such a short period of time, and then we have had additional unsafe sleep infant deaths
entirely preventable deaths. So we've stood back up with our partners at the Department of Health, our Safe Sleep Committee. We're launching the campaign, and a huge work plan has been developed to get the message back out to all parents across the state. You put a baby in bed with you, you run the risk that that baby is not going to wake up with you in the morning, so please stop. The second thing I would talk about is our family care community partnerships. We have 4 providers who are doing a wraparound model. I tend to get in the weeds, so I'll try to pull back on that. In any event, they are fully focused on preventing families from getting deeper into the system and having children removed from their care. The work that they're doing is outstanding, and I want to continue to make sure they have the resources. The last thing I'll say is that recently our Health and Human Services Secretary and directors were called before Senate Finance to talk about the challenges that they have with services and with budgets and things like that. I could not be there, but I watched the testimony from out of state. So I watched my colleagues, fellow directors, testify, and all I could think about was, yes, yes, yes. If we just made sure that the prevention programs through the Department of Health were resourced well and done well, if we just made sure that our parents had access to the very best substance abuse and mental health services through our adult behavioral health care, if we just made sure at the Department of Human Services that our families had access to resources that would lift them out of poverty, I would go away for the most part. We'll always need a little bit of DCYF, but we wouldn't need it nearly so resourcing those systems is so critical.
I'd like to back that up with just another couple of comments about the need for collaboration among the departments of human services, education, post-secondary education, labor and training. People need to talk to each other. We're not even talking about possibly a lot of dollars. We're talking about having real communication and an ability to work together, to share data, so that DHS and DCYF can see who the families are that they have in common and plan together how to help those families in the best way. Other states have adopted these kinds of forward-looking strategies using a public health model, as Trista described it, where prevention is the key. And we look at where all the vulnerabilities are. Rhode Island is small enough to be the county that Trista and I came here from, and there are lots of ways to encourage communication to happen, and we have not taken advantage of that.
I just wanted to chime in. I don't have much to say because of everything that's been said. Trista's points were almost identical to the ones I was going to make on the importance of prevention in getting in early and really reducing the pipeline of children and families that are even in the care of DCYF. I think that's going to require facing head-on the disproportionality and disparities by race and ethnicity. It's something that has to be talked about. It's something that we need better data on. We would have liked to have provided more data broken down by race and ethnicity. Is absolutely vital in terms of reaching families and kids in the communities in which they live. The second thing that Trista said that I want to amplify is that there are evidence-based programs that shouldn't be hanging by a thread, like evidence-based home visiting programs that get in early. Once kids are in the system and families, we need to prioritize their needs. So it is unacceptable that young children in the DCYF system don't have automatic access to the most important early childhood health and development programs that we can possibly provide. I think that's turning around. We're doing some good work with the Children's Cabinet to identify ways to really integrate data and make sure that those children are identified and served. And finally, for the youth out there, who are youth who have been leading the way on extending care to youth up to 21, I want to say to you, you keep up the good work. None of us want children to be on their own at 18 without the resources and supports they have to thrive. That is something that I think would give everyone a clear view of what success could look like if we really supported our kids through their adulthood.
Bruce, did I see you reach for the microphone, or shall we move on?
All set.
Go. Okay, and a question from the Providence Journal.
This is a question about leadership that I think I'd like to pose to both the child advocate and Dean Perlmutter. Both of you have talked about the lack of leadership historically at the DCYF. Jennifer, you serve a 5-year contractual term that potentially spans 2 administrations. Should the DCYF director serve a similar term that perhaps could create more stability and eliminate politics?
Tom, I would support the DCYF director having the same kind of term as I do. I think the benefit, or some may say the detriment, to having a 5-year term, I have the ability to run an independent state agency and be beholden to no one. And not to say that I don't respect the help in the budget I've received from the members of the General Assembly, but I think it's important to make the decisions running an agency that you feel is best and you feel is best there to help children. When I wouldn't have the same historical knowledge as all of DCYF. I've only been there 18 months as the child advocate, but from being familiar as I am and reading the articles from recently this weekend, it seems as if every time there's a new governor, sometimes there are new political appointments made. Not to say that, no offense to Tristan, not everyone's beating down the door to be the director of DCYF at times, but still, I think, you know, if a new governor were to come in or a new director, they had someone in mind, I think it's important for the director to be able to see I guess the fruits of their labors, or see the plans which they had laid out be successful. If sometimes in Trista's case, if there were to be a different governor, Tristan may have long-lasting plans that would go past 18 months or 2 years that wouldn't be able to be initiated. So I would support a 5-year term just like mine.
I'm like whack-a-mole. I just pop up all over the place. I'm with this gentleman here who has a question from the audience, sir.
Hey, good evening. My name is Craig Danella. I'm here with my wife, and we are foster parents. Have been so for about a year. Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, I don't know if I would do it again, and that's a problem. That's a problem for everybody up there. It's a problem that you guys went through. And Bruce, I understand what you say when you say some foster parents do it for the money. I wasn't in your shoes, but that's not our case. And I'm sure some parents who reunify, it also goes that way as well. I'm sure it works both ways, but that's not why I want to get off topic here. DCYF Children in Crisis couldn't be more of a appropriate title. Thank you for writing this article. It couldn't have come at a better time in our lives, so thank you. Unfortunately, Director Kohler, your department only makes the news when bad things happen. It's what you inherited. It's what you will go through as your tenure. When things are running smooth, you probably won't make the paper. You probably won't make the news. It's just one of those things. Unfortunately, I'm hearing money, and I'm hearing training, and I'm hearing a lot of different good ideas on how to fix the problem. But even so, right now, we have such basic things that the department is failing to get past, such as, and we all know the article, something simple as making a suggestion as to a mother staying with her child when she's prohibited to be alone with the child. Where does that sound like a good idea? Where along the line did somebody say, hey, this might work? Hey, I like your out-of-the-box thinking here. It's a bad idea. And not only did a caseworker or a social worker come up with that idea, I'm sure it went across a supervisor's desk. So 2 people had to say, hey, this is a good idea. So we're not even, I appreciate where you're trying to do, but at the level you're at right now, in-house, you have such issues. I've seen them, and that's why I say I don't know if I'd do it again. It's been discouraging. It's been frustrating. What are you going to do, A, to correct those problems? You have a motivational problem. I see it. You have a disgruntled worker problem. I see it. Unfortunately, that falls on your shoulders. How are you going to get these people's attitudes turned around? You know, it's one of the hardest things a leader can do, and you're the leader. They're looking for you for direction, for motivation. What are you going to do for that? My second part of my question is, as foster parents, I feel as though our voices aren't heard. Aren't heard. It's almost ignored, almost, they're disgruntled foster parents, almost predetermined to have the answers when it's just not that way. I hope I didn't sound angry or insulting, but like I said, I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated. Thank you for your time.
First of all, let me thank you for the work and the care that you provide on behalf of children in the state of Rhode Island. I want to say a couple of things. First, related to the workforce. So, when I arrived in Rhode Island, I spent the first 60 days meeting with staff directly, me, in open forums, and talking with them about what's working at the department, and I got a lot of feedback about what's not working. I continue those open forums, so they have a direct line to me to talk about what's getting in the way of getting the work done. And somebody said it earlier, I think it was Susie who said, you know, we have to listen to the staff, we have to listen to what's going on, and we have to react and respond to that. Part of it is, in terms of motivation, what I would tell you is we have a number of staff, and a number of them tenured, who, for them, child welfare isn't just a job. It's their life. It's who they are. It's what they do, and they've dedicated themselves to this. My job is to make sure that they have the resources and the tools that they need to do the very difficult job that we're asking them to do. So a couple of things related to that are making sure, again, I referenced earlier, proven practices. So implementing better screening tools, better safety tools, and better risk tools. You referenced something about safety plans in particular. Safety plans concern me, and I've talked very openly about that, about the kinds of safety plans that I believe help keep children safe, and the kinds of safety plans that I believe don't help keep children safe. I've had that conversation with the staff and our leadership. I've had that conversation with the chief judge sitting next to me, so he knows clearly about how I feel about safety plans. And we're going to continue that dialogue, and we're going to continue to have the court's oversight on some of those plans. It was very important to me coming into Rhode Island and knowing that there is still a long-standing issue with the overuse and misuse of congregate care for our kids. We still have 40% of our kids entering congregate care settings who should be living in a family. We have to have those families. We have to find them, we have to take care of them, and we have to support them. One of the things that I did when I came in is we stood up something called a Resource Families Division. Our work with families was spread out across the agency in different areas. So we stood up a Resource Families Division, and we are currently working on what is our family-based foster care model. What does the department own? What are we asking our providers to make a commitment to? And how are we going to do that work together to make sure that our foster families are absolutely supported in getting what they need?
Michelle, you have something? Oh, Bruce, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Your name again, sir? Craig? All right. Craig, do me a favor, please. When you go home, because you're a foster parent, your foster child is in your home, correct? Give them a big hug. Because what's going to happen is they're not going to say to you, thank you, thank you, thank you. They're not going to every single day come to you and say, hey, thanks for, supporting me. Don't become discouraged. You're there for a reason. So now, we sit here and we're talking about this and how we're going to make changes and how things are going to work, the whole 9 yards. You need a support system. There are so many support systems that are out there. So many different support systems that are out there for different things that are going on in our lives. You can have a support system for someone that has a hangnail. Go on Facebook, you'll find it, I promise you. Foster parents, you need something like this. Now, you had mentioned that your voice is not heard as a foster parent. As a single foster parent family, your voice will not be heard. But if you're able to get together with other families and that voice starts to grow, then you can actually have some change happen. My parents, my experience, yes, let it be 20 years ago when I finally moved out of my parents' house, well, 21 years ago, my parents did not know. They did not have a support system. They had one set of friends that were foster parents, and you had mentioned, or I had mentioned that, you know, they were the ones that were in it for the money. My parents were in it for the love. They adopted 8. They had 7 of their own. This is what they wanted to do. Gerard and Teresa Peralt, this is what they wanted to do. They have the same passion that you have. Go home, give your child a big hug and a kiss. They're not going to say thank you for anything other than thanks for dinner, thanks for money, thanks for, you know, whatever it is they do. I don't know how old the child is, but keep doing what you're doing on your level. Keep it up. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So similar to my friend Bruce here, I was going to say something very similar in that, so I was lucky enough to be adopted from foster care, and my parents are amazing, just people, and without them, and I've been asked to give a statement for Projo a while ago, and they didn't print this statement, and I'm going to say this statement again, and I'm hoping they print it. Without my foster parents, without my adoptive parents, I would be a crack whore. And, is there any kids in the room? Sorry. And I have a sibling who died of a drug overdose, who did not have the same level of opportunities. I have a brother who went to prison for murder. So you keep doing what you're doing because you're going to make a difference in the life of that child.
All right, back to Dean Perlmutter on this one. You mentioned in your opening remarks that training isn't keeping up to date with the complexity of the issues that are facing families. What sorts of things do social workers need to be getting training on, and why is Rhode Island so slow to make some of these changes?
I think other people have talked about the issues of substance use, of mental illness, which really have become more and more pronounced. The fact that poverty in Rhode Island is growing. All of those kinds of ways we have of evaluating a family aren't working anymore. We really need to have a very different picture of who these families are, and workers have to become more comfortable with working with very diverse kinds of families. Other states have made these discoveries because, in fact, their populations were more diverse, and those departments found it necessary to educate themselves. We have not done a very good job of that. Elizabeth talking about racial disparities, Michelle talking about them, there's very clear evidence that in Rhode Island, the disproportionality simply meaning that we have far more kids of Hispanic and African American background in care than we have in the general population. And we are not prepared for that, nor are we prepared for the cultural awareness that our staff would have to have. So it's those components, plus many of you, I'm sure, have heard of trauma-informed practice. That's relatively new in the past few years. We've not really practiced enough with the staff about what trauma looks like and feels like, how kids experience that, and how kids can, just using the development of their brains, have a reduction in the impact of that trauma. So it's really those kinds of things. And our training model in the past took new workers through a lot of information. And the newer models of training intersperse lots of practice, simulated practice, online activity, and opportunities to do in-class learning. So we have to have a better mix of how we teach workers in the field. There's also a discussion that Trista and I have been having about training for more than the people who work directly with children and families within the department, because all of those people have roles to play in supporting each other and in supporting the families who come to DCYF. And I guess the last thing about that is that it's a broader picture. Workforce development is about this broader understanding of child welfare as a career and what people need to understand about what that work is really like.
So very loud. We're switching mics, keeping it interesting. It's like karaoke night. A number of you have brought the General Assembly tonight. There are a number of folks from the General Assembly in the House, and we have one with a question.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank the former member of the General Assembly. I spent 7 years working in the child welfare world. It's one of the largest service providers in the state. One of my jobs was recruiting foster families, and it's not the easiest job in the world. So you adopted and foster parents that are in the audience, thank you for doing God's work. We need to find many more families like you. Thank you for everything that you're doing.
Who are you?
I'm Julie Casimiro, and I am a freshman in the House of Representatives. So my question is kind of twofold, because I saw some of the answers, some of the responses on the screen about the General Assembly isn't doing enough work. Aside from the budget, what else can we be doing as policymakers to help you? I've met with almost everybody on this panel. I've met with half of this room over the last year, asking specifically what we can do for policy to help you in your efforts in keeping children safe. So I know my fellow General Assembly members are here, and we're open to your ideas, and I just want to know what we can do specifically, aside from a challenging budget.
Not being someone that deals with this on a regular basis, I would say talk to those families. Have them come in and help you with the decisions. It almost seems like sometimes whenever a policy is made, the really, really smart people are in the room, and they use their brains when they're doing and making these decisions without the emotion that goes along with it. Families like Craig and my parents and Michelle's parents, bringing in other aspects to be able to help you make a decision, as opposed to sometimes the educated decision tends to be not the proper decision.
I would say making mental health, mental illness a priority, because that's where a lot of these issues stem from, and I heard that from both parents and the youth, that it's this untalked about thing, and with HIPAA laws and all that, a lot of the families don't even know what the history is of the kids or of the families. But I think if as a state we make mental illness a priority, that would help. That's the proactive that I can come up with.
Judge, are you nodding me?
Congratulations on your election. You're part of a citizen legislature, a part-time legislature, and having been there myself 100 years ago, I know how things fall out up there. I mean, you've done a tremendous amount of work to educate yourself in this particular field that you are already involved in, and we certainly all appreciate your hard work in that regard, but you also know that all the other members of the House, that's not the only thing they are interested in. A lot of issues come before the legislature. There has to be some level of expertise in all of those issues, and as the years go on, people tend to find their niche and educate themselves either in environmental issues or labor issues or issues such as the one that you're involved in now. So I guess the burden falls to the people like you to educate your colleagues, because when I was there, that was what was done. I know there's a lot of criticism sometimes about when people vote on things they don't know anything about. That does happen. But the reason it happens is because if you have somebody like this who's sitting next to you in the legislature, who's an expert in a particular topic, there's a lot of deference that goes on up there because every member doesn't have the time or the ability to become an expert in every subject. So you've become the mentor up there in your first term. And you and the other people that we see on a regular basis at Kids Count breakfasts and things of that sort, have an obligation to reach out to your colleagues, I think, and educate them about these very important issues, because otherwise, the House especially is going to be concentrating on the budget more than anything else, and you really need to make that committee a little more warm and fuzzy.
Anyone else have an answer on any panelists around policy?
I think as far as the General Assembly is concerned, you really need to keep a human face on what the department does. It gets lost.
I just wanted to say that I spend a lot of time attending hearings at the General Assembly. I mentioned a few minutes ago the really important passage of the law on expanding reporting requirements, and that put forth information into the public domain that would not have been known. I subsequently have sat in on many of the oversight hearings on both the House side and the Senate side, and I think what those do is they try to pinpoint what happened and, most importantly, what has changed as a result of some of these tragedies occurring in rapid-fire order. I think one of the things that came out that the director did a really important job of describing was in terms of assessing risk at the front door, what is really being done to review those cases that are marked information referrals that aren't initially going to be investigated within 24 hours. I think that was worth sort of a 6-hour hearing to sit in on that. I think that some of the policies some of the policy ideas that come out of those hearings need to be the ball that's carried into the next General Assembly session. And I also think the human face is important. I think that the advocacy of young people who are just about to age out of care without permanency and to hit their adulthood with no support were incredibly strong voices. We have been heard in the form of during the summer into the fall work group that's being presided over by Representative Deborah Giro on the House side and Senator Lou DePalma, working every month to really look at best practices for extending care to 21 from other states. So I have hope that with some of these facts being out there and some of the real concerns being raised, and that's part of the General Assembly's role, that these issues can be acted on in terms of what are we learning from some of these tragedies that immediately inform new systems, and we need to keep that up.
Go ahead, Michelle.
A number of years ago, the budget was cut so that kids between the ages of 18 and 21 no longer receive services. And when I was sitting down with some of the youth, I heard stories of being in high school, and all of a sudden you're no longer in foster care, and you're basically supposed to become an independent person while you're still in high school at 18 years old. So from a budget perspective, Julie, I'd say when that stuff starts to hit the fan, that you bring that voice and that face of a teenager that's going to end up in Kennedy Plaza living, to your peers.
I'd just like to respond to that just 1 second. This director, on her own, took the initiative to make a policy decision that kids who are still in school would not be cut off from DCYF services. I think that was a very brave thing for her to do, and we're hoping that the kids that you saw are going to benefit from that. It's a huge shift in the department's policies, and one person can make a difference.
Thank you. We're going to move on to a question from the Providence Journal.
This question is to the director. I'd like to ask you about the influence employee unions have had at the DCYF when it comes to making policy changes. There are at least, I think, a half dozen unions in the 600-member workforce. Issues of who does the work, a state worker or a private provider, have been raised before. Is the union influence in Rhode Island different than what you were used to in Ohio? And do you see it as an impediment in any way to what you want to accomplish?
Thank you. I have worked with unions in the past, primarily in Ohio, worked in a right-to-work state also in Virginia where we didn't have that. I guess if I had a preference, I would prefer unionized states. And, believe it or not, there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that the protections that they afford the workforce and the advocacy that they provide, and you see that very strongly in the state of Rhode Island, and I think that's so important. One of the things that I did when I got here to Rhode Island is I arranged meetings with all of the union leadership. I think I have 9 unions that we work with, and they range from folks at the training school with a couple of unions to our DCYF staff and teachers. So it's been an interesting challenge in some ways to make sure that I'm able to spend time with all of those leaders and pay attention to the issues and concerns that they raise. What I would tell you is that open communication is absolutely key. When I came in the door, I asked our legal department, I said, will you bring me all of the outstanding grievances? And knowing that I had a large number of unions, I was sort of prepared. They brought me a binder like this thick. And I said, wow, that's a whole lot more than I thought there would be. But one by one, we went through those grievances. And some of them had been a number of years old, but they had still been unresolved. And one by one, we went through them and decided which ones still needed to be resolved, were still legitimate grievances. So again, I can't emphasize enough the continuation of open communication. We don't always agree on a path of action, but I continue to say to people, we can agree to disagree without being disagreeable. So we want the same things, and that is for our kids and families to have their needs met by the department and to have a strong, stable, competent workforce. So if we always keep those 2 goals at the center of our work together, we will keep moving forward.
A question from the audience?
Hi, my name is Kenny. I just have a question. It's like to any of you guys, but what are you guys doing to help the LGBTQ plus youth that are waiting for family or permanency? Or if they age out, what are we doing to help them with supports and resources?
Who would like to answer that?
I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad you raised the issue. We know from all of the national research that there are major obstacles that are encountered by gay, lesbian, transgender, and bi youth, and we really, really need to engage more with those youth directly. I know that there are many members of The Voice and other youth groups that are out there that are very, very vocal about what their needs are that are not being met. I would encourage a direct dialogue, if it hasn't started already, with the director and her team, because the incidence of mental health issues, suicides, and other horrible outcomes are much more prevalent for LGBTQ youth, and I just really am glad you're here. So you keep up your advocacy, you are making a difference, and you deserve every possible benefit and support to have a very full life and to reach adulthood as a successful citizen of Rhode Island. So you keep up the advocacy, and I urge you and others that care about youth to make your specific issues known to the director.
So I echo everything that Elizabeth just said, and thank you for raising this. It's interesting because I just went to the judges conference portion of it last week, and they had an entire presentation on this issue. And what I said at that point was, every time I go to one of these conferences and receive some training and some information, I think I got it all. I think it's all up here, and I've learned everything I need to know. And I stood up and said, I learned more things. And one of the most important takeaways for me from that presentation that they did is, we don't represent it in the data. We are still just simply female. We don't talk about it enough. So I walked away with that point, and I'm still sort of mulling over, how are we going to address that? How are we going to begin to show those points of information when we have reports that we're sending out, when we're sharing information? So I'm still mulling that over. I'm always interested in getting feedback about that. We also have services that we contract for within the agency that are specifically designed for our youth, LGBTQI. So I'm proud of those. Is it enough? Probably not. But we're more than willing to sit down and talk with our youth. We have regular conversations with the Voice. In fact, I invited our Voice president. She's sitting in the audience. Give a wave, Blanca. I am thrilled that she agreed to be in the audience this evening, so the two of you also connect this evening.
Connections being made at public occurrences. Next question from the Providence Journal.
All right, this question's for the child advocate. Your office gets involved in the oversight of group homes. We reported recently that there are not minimum qualifications for the workers in these homes that involves any kind of child welfare training. Should there be?
Yes, absolutely. I often say, maybe to my detriment all the time, I don't belong working in a group home. I am a lawyer. I am not, I don't think, well-versed to deal with a young group of children who present with, as everyone said today, it's not uncommon for a child to be in a group home having been traumatized sexually or physically, having experienced domestic violence in their home, substance abuse by themselves or their parents, having significant mental health issues on top of potential developmental delays, and frankly, we're housing them in congregate care. This is not to say that all group homes in Rhode Island are bad, but I can say this, all group homes in Rhode Island could be better. I don't think it's appropriate when I go to a site review to have trouble discerning who works there and who lives there. This is not an assault upon 19-year-olds who are interested in elementary education or social work. I applaud their interest in working in child welfare, but I don't think it's the appropriate venue for their entree, if you will, into child welfare to be dealing with, 6 to 12 youth who have significant issues. And I think part of this would segue into, again, I agree with Trista about the significant need to speed up the recruitment of foster care immediately, if not sooner. This is something she and I have worked together with in identifying different communities which have very high pull rates from their town or city. And we actually will be scheduling a date to be determined, because we haven't picked it with our schedules yet, a forum actually in Woonsocket to address this very issue. So thank you for your question, Jennifer.
Up on the balcony, I have an audience question.
Hi, I'm Carrie Mazzoni, and I have a question for either the advocate or the director of DCYF regarding group homes and residential placements. When there is a report of a sexual assault or any kind of abuse, how is it acceptable that DCYF investigate an incident that happened in a DCYF-funded facility? And also, the staff that are supposedly protecting these children, why are they not held accountable when an incident happens? Why are they not charged with neglect or child endangerment the same way you would go into a parent's home and charge them and have them go through the system?
To answer your question, Carrie, I would say that since I've been the child advocate, we have investigated physical assaults upon children and sexual assaults upon children in congregate care. I have had discussions both with the prior chief strategy officer and Trista about particular group homes which fall into the category of institutional abuse. I agree, it doesn't seem to make much sense if someone who works in a group home is indicated for physical violence. If you were to commit the same act at home, you would find yourself possibly with a neglect charge or a criminal charge pending against you. I think this is something that Tristan and I have talked about and are continuing to speak about to kind of mandate those in group homes. I would like to see further education and experience before people are allowed to work in group homes. It's really no different. We require teachers to have an education. If you have a counselor, they have an education. I can't see why we would ask children to live at a group home with people who are, and again, this is not assault upon the young, but 18, 19, 20 years old. It makes no sense to me.
Question from the sorry, go ahead.
I'll be very brief. Carrie, it's never acceptable, ever, for any of our children to be assaulted in a group home, in a residential placement, or in a foster home, ever. So as Jennifer mentioned, we are accelerating our efforts and we are examining all of those group home and residential placements to determine whether or not our kids are safe. It's never acceptable.
I just want to applaud you for your question as well and say that right now we've got 355 Rhode Island children living in a residential facility or a group home, and that's too many. At the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the high percentage of Rhode Island youth in the care of DCYF in congregate care. That is not primarily where they belong. They belong with families. Every kid needs a family. We need to be accelerating our efforts to put youth, especially teens, who have been the hardest to find foster families to step forward and care for in family settings. And what you're talking about needs to fuel the urgency of this work, to turn the system around and make sure that our young people are in families rather than in congregate care.
I want to support what's been said. All of us up here have been banging our heads together, really, trying to figure out, how to improve recruitment. And it's somewhat disheartening to hear, if a foster parent express any negativism about their experience or say that they would never do it again. But, that's an issue to me of, the supports weren't out there to support that family when they needed it. But, I mean, if you think about what kids are getting in a foster home as opposed to a group home, this is what we're providing them. We're providing them with love, nurture, modeling, or a good example, as you might say, an opportunity for peer relationships with non-DCYF involved youth, normal contacts with the community and peers, less stigma attached to them for being in placement, and the possibility of a long-term relationship that it can extend into adulthood, which I'm sure you people understand. When they're 18, you're not going to boot them out the door. So, I mean, this is what we're providing kids that we can't provide to them in congregate care. So it's almost neglectful to put them in these institutional style settings, and it's only being done, obviously, because we don't have any alternatives. So I think everyone up here can pledge that we are going to do everything possible to try to create more foster homes, more licensed foster homes, and try to keep kids out of the congregate care.
I think this will probably be the final question for the Providence Journal. I'm going to try to get two more audience questions if we have time, but we may run out. I know a lot of you have questions, I'm sorry.
This question is back to the director. Is the department now doing more thorough investigations of calls coming into the abuse hotline? And do you have any new statistics on, for instance, a percentage of those calls that are now actually, eyes-on investigations as opposed to IRs?
So a couple of things. The short answer is yes, there are more investigations that are happening. The revelation in the Child Advocates report that came out in March, something that she and I discussed even before the report came out, that we were miscategorizing things as what we call an information and referral. But information referral I just want to say real quickly, got a bit of a bad rap. Those are situations where there may have been a response. The problem with our information and referral system is the bucket was this big and the response was very varied, as I have said before. We are in the process of eliminating what we have called information and referral. It is my belief that when calls come into the agency, you have an initial decision to make. That initial decision is it screened in or is it screened out? If it's screened in, then it's going to go one of two pathways. It's going to receive an investigation because there is a specific allegation of child maltreatment, or it's going to receive a family assessment response, which doesn't look wholly different from an investigation. Those are families that we would characterize at risk of maltreatment. If we don't intervene and try to do something now, they are coming back for an investigation, and child maltreatment at that point may have already occurred. And so that's the system that we are in the process. It's not an easy lift, I will tell you. We've written the policies and procedures. We've gone over those with the family court and also with the child advocate. So we're on the pathway to a new system.
I have a question from the audience. Yes, sir. Please.
Thank you. John Christensen. My wife and I were foster parents for
Well, it's
What's the tackle?
not always pleasant to explain what the law is to people, because as you've described it, there's a little bit of truth in that. The law basically is that people have a constitutional right to their children. Because of that, case law, not just on the state level, but right up through the United States Supreme Court, is that parents have a right to parent their children unless they're found to be unfit. So when we do a termination of parental rights hearing, there must be a finding first as to parental unfitness before we ever get to the issue of what's in the best interest of the child. It's a two-step process, but the first step is we have to make a determination that the parents are unfit. That's certainly a frustration for probably everybody involved in the system, but constitutional rights are constitutional rights. And we go through that process, and typically, if a TPR is filed, really the case is at a point where it's going to go all the way to termination. But it's a long process. It takes a long time in the family court. It's a full-blown trial, discovery, all those other things that go on. And then even more frustrating, certainly to us, I know there's a justice sitting over in the corner there that has raised the issue of how long it takes the Rhode Island Supreme Court to hear the appeals of these termination of parental rights decisions. And it just takes a long time. These kids are in limbo, the foster parents are in limbo. You know, that I think is something that can be addressed, that we need to take a hard look at, how to expedite the process. You know, the law is what it is. We can't change that, but there's no reason we can't expedite that process either through having trial weeks, which is something we are using in the family court, where we have all the TPR cases are bunched into trial weeks, and we concentrate on that calendar on just doing those and getting those cases resolved. But once they're resolved at that level, we need to be talking to the Supreme Court, and not that we haven't in the past, but we need to keep reiterating to them how important it is that they put these cases on a priority track, you know, at their level as well.
Okay, final question from the audience, and then, but don't leave. We've got one more eye clicker question, and everyone's going to do their final closing remarks. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Timmy. Coming from the residential side of DCYF, I have a question. First question is, what I see working in the residential is a lot of misplacement of children who are put in certain level of care that don't quite need it. Like the kids don't need the residential care. Either the kid is their case is their mental illness is just too much for the residential, and I feel like the DCYF worker or social worker know that this kid doesn't fit this program, and they still stick the kid in that program. It seems to me like they put them in that program just to put them in there so they can say they can replace them. What are you guys doing to try to rectify that? Because a lot of residential counselors and a lot of child care workers are put in situations, dangerous situations, and kids are put in dangerous situations because of that. The other part is a lot of residential treatment centers claim to be treatment, but they're really not. I want to know what DCYF is doing to oversee paperwork and prove that there's actual treatment going on and not just babysitting.
Thank you for your question. I'd like to answer first. I think many of us here tonight had mentioned that there are an unfortunate number of children way too high. I mean, frankly, one is too high, who are misplaced in the wrong program due to the lack of service array. There was a recent procurement last year, and I believe from speaking with Trista, there'll be another one to identify any gaps in service. I heard you mention mental illness. I would also say there's a greater need for a higher-end facility for young women. The boys have many more opportunities for higher-end mental health treatment. There's also a lack of substance abuse treatment as well, especially with the opiate crisis that we have in Rhode Island. For the group homes, I would say if there's a concern in a group home, my office does do site reviews of all group homes, and if particular ones are not providing the trauma assessment they're supposed to, or the actual therapy they've proposed that they were supposed to do, we're asking for Trista to either shut them down or have a discussion about how then going forward they'll be in contract compliance. So thank you for your question, but that's certainly something my office is aware of, and we've been directing our complaints about those group homes directly to Trista.
So I would echo all of that. I would also say to you, we have stood back up within the department, our Community Services and Behavioral Health division, so that we can have more expertise on the behavioral health care needs of all of our kids, but particularly those kids who are in residential and group home placements. We've implemented something called utilization management, which is simply a system for all of our kids who are in residential and group care to have their treatment regimen and protocols and outcomes reviewed on a regular basis. When we find that our kids are mismatched with a treatment protocol or system or placement, we're able to act much more swiftly to find services that will meet their needs. Thank you.
I'd like to point out that the two most in-demand public occurrences that we've had out of the 14, or I guess tonight it's 15, over 7 years, was mental health was the other one, and then tonight. So I think it's come up a lot this evening, and so I just want to point out to everyone, if it's not obvious and painfully obvious, that this is what people are very concerned about in Rhode Island, and it's quite clear, even by attendance alone. Let's throw off this final question before we do the 1-minute closings, and we'll start on this side of the room just to prepare yourselves and go in reverse. So here's our final question. You may have seen this before. My impression of DCYF is A, doing its best at a difficult job. B, always been a mess, can't be fixed. C, has problems, on way to fixing them. Or D, has problems, not on the way to fixing them. A, B, C, or D. Looks like we're making Paul Parker's job easy. No one left with an eye clicker. Does that mean we do his numbers? Largely C. Largely. Has problems, on the way to fixing. So with that, let's hear our 1-minute closing remarks, and we'll start with Elizabeth. Go ahead.
I want to start with some context for the issue that's before the state with the issue of DCYF, and that is we have to focus on prevention and reducing the pipeline of children and families involved with the department. In 2016, there were 14,942 unduplicated child maltreatment reports to the Child Abuse Hotline. That's up from 12,204 just 8 years ago. It's moving in the wrong direction. It's something we need to get in earlier with prevention strategies that work.
So I asked for 4 minutes and he won't let me have them, so I'm gonna trim this down.
She's giving you 30 seconds.
Okay, good.
On top of it.
So I want to thank everyone, first of all, for this evening's. I think that I got what I wanted, which was generating some ideas, thoughtful ideas around solutions. So I thank all of the fellow panel members and certainly the audience and those listening at home. One of the things I would tell you is that eight months ago, when I was going through the selection and confirmation processes, people asked me, why Rhode Island? And I gave a response at that time based on what I knew at the time. And 8 months later, I could give you a much more thorough answer. And the answer is sitting on this stage and in this audience and out there listening. Rhode Island has all of the ingredients to have a solid child welfare system. We have what we need. And our greatest asset is our DCYF staff, so we have to support and take care of them. But one of the things I want to say is that we have to be persistent, We have to stay the course, and we have to always remember that child safety is our #1 priority. Child safety at home, child safety at school, and child safety in the community. And we have to take care of and support one another through success, and there are many, and we don't take a lot of opportunity to talk about the huge number of families that DCYF intervenes with and keeps kids safe and keeps families together. And they are there, and we need to talk about that more often. But the test is what we do together through the tough times, when things don't go as they should. Do we abandon? Do we point fingers? Do we blame? Or do we stand together and unify and hold one another accountable and have thoughtful examination about what went wrong and then take action together? It's my belief that the hallmark of an excellent system is not how we behave when things go well, but how we behave when things don't go well. So I thank you again for being part of this conversation, and I'm looking forward to our work together. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the audience for their attention and their thoughtful questions. I think we all agree that really the title up there should say Rhode Island Children in Crisis, not DCYF. The responsibility that's leveled at this agency is ludicrous. This is a societal problem, and society needs to get involved if we're going to be able to solve it. All the community stakeholders, the business communities, the religious communities, social groups, everybody has to step up and get involved. You can't expect one department with limited resources to solve all these social problems. You know, they get the brunt of the attack, and they, I think, respond with dignity and as best they can. But until the public is willing to really educate themselves, whether it's through the legislature, through programming, a lot of agencies around with a lot of data and a lot of good information, but people have to come forward and become a part of the solution.
As the chief said, I think the greatest resource we would have would be you, those who took the time in your day to get these very hot tickets for tonight. I think you're lucky today. I'm not sure what the reception situation is after this, but you do have the Executive Director of Adoption Rhode Island in the audience. I see you, Darlene, yes. I also see Lisa Gillette, the Director of Foster Forward, and I do see in the back row my friends from the village, Maya and Elaine. They are here. You don't necessarily have to be as excellent as your parents and adopt so many children. Not that I wouldn't fight that, but be a mentor. Go talk about your career. Be your visiting resource for your child's, who sits next to them in middle school, and be involved. It's not that it's not important to come to these, but do something with the knowledge you gained today, and tell your friends this weekend or tell your hairdresser tomorrow about how you could just be a mentor and make a difference in a child's life. If you didn't catch those names, you can call me this week and I will give you those numbers to you. Thank you.
So now there's a push towards recruitment, and it's very hard. Very hard for someone to bring a child into their home and potentially have that child taken away from them. My mother would sit there on a regular basis, whether the child was in the house for 24 hours, or I had a brother and sister that were in the house for 7 years, and they were taken away to go to be with their biological family. It is very hard, but it is also something that is extremely rewarding. I know that my mother and my father, who passed away about 1.5 years ago, they did whatever they possibly could to make sure that we were in a loving home. They raised us the way that they raised their own children. So if you have the ability to talk to friends, talk to families, people that are in the same situation just like yourself, people that want to be able to provide something for a child above and beyond what the child is getting right now at this moment in time. They're lost, they're scared. More scared than you're going to be. When the time does come for you to bring a child into your home, it is going to be very rewarding. And it's also going to be terrifying. And when that child leaves you, because the child could very well leave you, just know that you're giving them something that they're going to remember for the remainder of their lives. You're going to give them hope. Hopefully they're going to take some of the guidance that you gave them and move themselves forward. So go home, talk to friends, talk to family, put it on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever, Instagram, whatever. What's the other one? Is there another one? So am I. Wrangler kids. But do whatever you can to get the word out, because there are children that are out there that need our help. They need our guidance. Thank you.
So I'm just thinking of summarizing what I've heard tonight and from the voice that I intended to bring here. And I'm going to say something a little cliche, and that is who is the customer, right? So having had the opportunity to speak to youth last week and to speak to foster parents the week before, I think both groups are feeling that they are not seen and that their voice is not heard. And one of the examples of that is, when there's an investigation that's happening, it's like they're not, the child or the foster parent is either not in the room or being blamed for something. And so what I would say is just make sure that we're remembering who the customer is. So it's the child, it's the foster parent, at times it's the parent, but it's remembering that we have to provide a service to them as well and not forget them in this process. So we can bring the legislators together, we can bring the social services folks together, but we also need to not forget who the customer is.
I've been thinking a lot about the history of this place where you all are sitting, that the state home and school was on this property. Rhode Island's history is when things get difficult for families, children get put away, taken away. We can't let that continue to happen. We have to create families that our children can be in if they cannot be in their biological family. The problems of the youth and young adults in our system are astoundingly related to being in congregate care. 215 youth between 16 and 18, I think more than half of them are in congregate care. It's just not sustainable. And I guess my last point is, we know that the cost of keeping kids in care till they age out and then allowing them to be independent is huge compared to helping them to find a permanent family. That's what we need to be about.
We can do better, and we must do better. We will do better, but it will take all of us as a state and a community